I love the fact that we have to go to microphones these days. So, want to make this kind of as question and answer as possible. There's just a couple kind of high points I want to bring up. We will then go through a kind of a short visual. You've seen some of the things already with respect to rendering. There are some small changes being made as we move forward, and I'll kind of give you an update with that. And then I want to open it up as soon as possible to questions and answers. So just as a matter of background, a couple things. Excuse me. First is just, it's a good time now because we're getting very close to launching this, or to having our voters meeting for this, to kind of just step back and make sure we all know and remember what we're playing for and what the purpose of this building is about. So I brought in our weekly bulletin, and most of it is on the back, right? Our mission, Lord of Glory, is a welcoming family, living and serving, or living and growing in Christ, and following His example in active service to one another. We've got 5 core values that we've focused on: Christ Himself, the Word, discipleship, relationships, and worship. And then finally, and service. And then finally, we talked way back when we started this process about, the next 5 years or so where we're going, and we had 3 critical targets that we wanted to focus on. One was education, not only extending the current education that we have here at Lord of Glory, but also, growing and developing new educational missions and ministries and opportunities. The second thing was enhancing and developing and increasing our service and outreach, both to the community, but also our service internally to one another. And the third thing was, moving forward to enhance our worship and take our worship to the highest level possible. The whole point behind that was to frame a direction for the church going forward. This building is nothing more than a support function to that. It's not a building for building's sake. It is here to help us support that long-range plan. So I just wanted to make sure we started on that base again, because, again, it's so often easy to get caught up in all the excitement here, but the excitement really should be around where we're trying to take the church. Second thing I wanted to point out is we are getting close from an architectural perspective. Just to remind you, one of the things that comes out of this whole process is soon there should be a reasonably finalized set of plans on which the Aspen Group will give us a guaranteed maximum price. So we will have a number. That number they are fully aware has to fit within where our budget is. They're, I think, quite close. Where's Brian at? Brian's they're getting in there. I think the next couple weeks here is about finalizing that. That number we gave them was $2.1 million roughly. That includes their architectural fees of about $170,000 that we've already written a check for. So we're in line. There's $2 million roughly in the building fund. So one of our big goals, obviously, is again not to take out a loan to build this building, and we're on track for that. When that number comes and we get a little bit more finalized detail in terms of what the final architectural plan looks like, we will be coming to the congregation for a go-ahead for building. Okay, tentatively that plan is set for May 6th. That meeting, just so you can kind of mark it in your calendars. I think we'll start announcing that pretty aggressively here. The only thing that would trip that up is if Aspen Group doesn't quite get us their guaranteed maximum price back before that period. And so I'll ask you to kind of hang with us here, but that's the game plan right now is May 6th, okay? Before we start going over the building, any questions on those two things? Yeah, Wally.
Steve, I just wanted to bring up something, because since it's been mentioned, I've talked about city water and sewer and everything else, or more of they looked into any other alternatives, whether this would be introduced into this before we build, so that, you know, like a fire pump house, so in other words, it's a special pump, just when it's needed, so that, you know, it's not like you wouldn't have time into the city systems, but at least you would give yourself more fire protection within the building itself at the beginning versus trying to maybe have to introduce it later on. Because of the fact that a lot of ordinances are coming out nowadays today, especially in new construction, that are requiring sprinkler systems.
Yeah, we've been through all that in a lot of detail about, actually, most of that was done about a year ago. The short answer, first of all, is that building the way you're building doesn't require it, or we won't need it. This is, because it meets code, obviously it has to. Secondly, the building itself is pretty fire resistant. I think here, with the exception of some things we've done for additions, it's all steel, right? So, and the carpet, I guess, which is fire retardant. So the building itself is fine. Third, as long as you're, any other additional building we would do, which there's really no room anymore for, after this building, there's no more room for contiguous building space. We're just out of space. We have a floodplain that we have to abide by there. So if for some reason we would do any other building on this property, which likely the answer is no anyway, would have to be done to the back of the property or something like that. So for all those reasons, it's not necessary. But then the other side of it, which is trying to live within our means, on the other side of it, there is no good cost-effective way to do it unless we wanted to spend substantially more money. We've looked at, you can do these sprinkler systems with a pump and a tank or a cistern or a pit that captures the water and you pump it in. That still that's a lot less expensive than going under 120 and hooking up, but it's still expensive. And the view was, since it's not necessary for code reasons, why do it? And use that money, which is probably a couple $100,000 elsewhere, either in the building or for other parts of the church. So we've thought about it long and hard and gone through all of that stuff. And there's choices in everything you do, but I think this choice was pretty apparent, the right way to go. Why don't we throw up any other quick questions? Because that's a specific building question, and we're going to throw up some pictures here, and then we can talk more about some of those issues.
If you have your meeting on the 6th, what is the anticipated start, duration of construction?
Okay, that's a good question. So if we have the meeting on the 6th and get the go-ahead from the congregation on the 6th, Aspen, and again, tentative because all things can, lots of things get in the way. Tentative thoughts would be the week of the 20th of May would be groundbreaking. And if is the 20th a Sunday? If we broke ground on that Sunday, they would probably be here with caterpillars and everything, either Monday or Tuesday. So it would be that last week. And that fits kind of nicely because it's about when preschool starts breaking. Yeah, so that, they're not going to actually start digging on that Tuesday or whatever, but they're getting prepared. Preschool finishes that week, and we can, really get into it. So a lot of the heavy work we could get done in 3 or 4 months' time before preschool started up and that sort of thing. And then a tentative, very tentative final finishing day would probably be in February or March of 2013. 8 months? 8 months is the goal. So Aspen sent us a few things just to give you some renderings as to what kind of the elevations would look like with a little bit more detail. So here, this is looking at the profile of the church from the parking lot. As you see, we've done a lot of glass here. The whole idea, and this goes back to our mission statement, a welcoming family, right? So we want to have a sort of a visual image that welcomes people in. And you've got handicap access here. and small step-up steps there with railing. But I think it gives you a nice kind of open and welcoming kind of a view as you step in. Can't do stained glass these days, that gets expensive as well, but I think the glass we have gives a nice kind of go to the next one. And then this is just a side view, kind of people, we've had a lot of questions about, well, what's the food pantry element going to look like? And so here you can see this wing is the food pantry wing. There's an access ramp here for deliveries with a canopy over the top, keep rain off people's heads, and there'll be, I think, flow as well from the food pantry in terms of the clients coming and going there as well. Shift it to the next one. This is the front of the church, and it's a fairly plain front. That's one of the things that came back in the programming phase of this. Very strong perspective of the congregation that we didn't have to have a really groovy looking exterior. We were much more concerned about functionality on the inside of the building and getting that right. So the exterior kind of exhibits that. We've had some discussion about getting putting a cross and that sort of thing at the top. It also does give us some room to do things in front later on if we'd like. And don't forget, this front almost perfectly centers with what we have already in the 3 crosses out in front of the not that those couldn't be moved, but just to give you a sense of what's going to be the image of the front of the church from the highway. So you will have kind of the our 3 crosses sitting here out in front. Next one. This is just another side view. This is this is pastor's office here. He will have a step out, and there'll be room later if we would like to maybe put a pad out here for him. You'll have a visual from inside looking at as well. So the whole idea is maybe a nice kind of warm courtyard there to, pastor can suntan or whatever he wants to do. Right. But it's kind of a nice little, nook there. So here's what the aerial photo would look like. Food pantry here, sanctuary here, narthex here. This is the office area, and then nursery kind of juts in here, nursery area in here, and then back along here will be adult. Would be a big room for both adult education as well as council, places for council meetings and so forth. Playground is still planned to stay where it is. We could have a conversation about it, but I think it fits pretty nicely where it is. Anything, yes?
So the light gray is the existing area then?
Yeah, so this is the existing, where we're at right now, and we have a little entrance here, right? That changes with this, that goes away with the new building.
Apparently that's into the parking lot. I mean, is that, so you're going to lose the parking lot?
How many spaces did we say? 6?
Yeah,
The question was how many parking spaces do we lose? Yeah, we lose those 4 handicap spaces, which would have to be moved, and I think that's it, right? We actually might lose one more here because he's got the concrete extending. But if you guys want a visual, by the way, if you step outside and look, we have 4 handicap signs, parking signs right there. This corner of the building goes just to this side of that 4th sign. So if you want to see the footprint, get a sense of the size of the footprint it'll take up, that's the way to think about it.
Steve, why would we have to lose that?
Well, because this to get the space in, this comes out this way a little bit, and it really has a lot to do with structurally how. So you've got a corridor here going into the preschool. To get that to match with a corridor that's going to link it up without jogging and doing that sort of thing, you need to move this back a little bit. So if you actually stand, a good way to think about it is if you kind of stand where the current entry is and kind of look out and say, well, how does that line up. That's why this has to come back a little bit.
So do we lose a window in one of the classrooms there? Kind of looks like that.
You will lose, so,
Well,
the work, it's actually that classroom, which is a workroom now, you lose that window. Wally?
One question, you know, you made a little, the corridor is made on the inside from the bathroom, you put a fan on. What are the drainage that you're gonna need for that, because of the fact that you got two pitched roads and the snow and everything else?
We addressed that last meeting explicitly with them, and I don't have the elevation grade and everything for you here, but there's two things. You're carrying with gutters, and then you have a swale built in here that brings the water back out along, just like you have. You don't really notice the swale, well, you might notice it a little bit over here, but there's a swale that runs currently. Be the same sort of construct, but even more so to get that drainage out and around. But they've explicitly gone through that engineering. I'm sorry? Well, so everything that we have to do obviously is ADA, has to be ADA, American with Disabilities Act compliant. So in that sense, anything with access has to be, handicap accessible. So right now, he's showing this with a ramp here. These doors will, are they powered? Is there a power access?
We're discussing whether or not we're going to provide that cost.
Okay, so that's,
We're hoping.
but your ADA and the other building is still remain, and therefore you still want to.
correct, yeah. So everything should be good to go from an ADA perspective. Any other questions from the top side here? Yeah, David.
So white roof, is that flat or is that a pitch, is there a pitch, so white car?
So this is pitched, this is flat, okay? So that'll be a decking. Part of that, not so much here, but what he doesn't show is there's, behind here, the reason for this, not only is it here for kind of a visual effect, but back here will be parked the HVAC system and all the mechanical system and everything, and you need a flat deck for that. So if you actually look through this into the engineering, this has got a pretty beefed up roof that will carry that weight and that sort of thing. That's just another look.